Join me as we paint these easy geraniums with watercolor. And I've already sketched these out, so I'm using hot pressed watercolor paper. It's not my favorite, but I decided I would give it a little whirl. But it is 140-pound hot pressed paper on a block. And what I'm using is a little bit of opera rose and a little bit of permanent rose. I'm wetting each one of the flower petals first with some clear water, and then I am going ahead and adding in my opera rose and just sort of blending it across that water a little bit. The thing about this hot press paper is it dries a lot quicker than cold press, or it seems to just suck up the water or something. So now you saw that I added a little bit of the permanent rose to make a dark area. And now I'm lifting up a little bit of that opera rose so that I'll have a little highlight, a little light area, and just blending it out, blending around the edges so it's not such a hard edge. And I'm just picking up a little bit more of the paint. I'm doing that with a damp, dry brush. What I mean by that is I have dabbed my brush off on the paper towel so that it's still a little damp and a little dry, if that makes any sense. And then I'm just picking that paint up. Now I'm coming in and I'm just doing the edge of this one petal that is curled over, and I'm going to paint that first with just the plain opera rose, a really pale mix of it, so it's pretty diluted. And as you hear, Dorian Gray is in rare form. He is my little diamond dove, and he is cooing in the background. He is talking to me today, and he must have heard his name, so now he's being quiet to see if I'm telling him something interesting. But he is in rare form, so you will hear him cheer us on in the background. I'm just going to continue to work my way around the petals of the geranium with some of this opera rose, and then again adding that permanent rose sort of in the center, like a little band across that center petal. And I'm just going to keep doing that around each one of the petals, around each flower. Now, I didn't draw a big cluster. You know how geraniums, they just grow in like a ball on, or they bloom in a ball on the end of this long stem. I sort of made this, took some artistic liberties and spread the actual blossoms out so that it wasn't an actual sphere or ball, and just sort of kind of, sprinkled them along the page. But they are still geraniums. So that was, I just wanted to make it a little bit more artistic, or a little bit more, just less like a big blob. So I'm just going to continue on painting each one of these flower petals with a little bit of opera rose and a little bit of the permanent rose for the dark marking. Now I'm just going to finish up the flowers. As you see, I have gotten most of them, the petals, painted. And you see where I've left a little light area in between each petal, sort of a light pink area, so that they have some definition. And made sure that I took care to have light and dark shadowy areas. So I'm just going to paint in these last few petals, and then we are going to work on those leaves. Geraniums have these like sort of frilly leaves, or the ruffles on the edges. I don't know how to describe them, but I love geranium leaves. But we're going to do a really simplified one. So we're letting those petals dry. I'm getting a little bit of sap green, a little bit of yellow. I think it's cadmium yellow. Mixing that together to have a nice, fresh, bright green. Coming in with a little bit of blue green and mixing it in as well, just to darken it up some. And I'm just going to go ahead and apply it straight to the leaf. You can wet your leaf first if you'd like, or you can just apply it straight to the dry paper. It's up to you, because we're just going to continue to just sort of dab in the color. So I'm being careful going around the petals of the flower. I want to keep the area where the petals are overlapping that leaf a little dark around that edge. So I'm making sure that I'm putting a little bit more of the blue-green pigment right around that edge. I've decided to go ahead and get some perylene green and mix in a little bit of indigo blue with it to make a darker green. And while it's still wet, I'm just going to drop it in there and just sort of pat it around. I'm not going for a realistic leaf. I'm going for a leaf that just has some texture and gives you a hint that it is actually a geranium leaf. And there's a little leaf right behind here. I'm going to go ahead and put the lighter sort of yellow-green color in, and then come back with that darker color where the top leaf overlaps that little bottom leaf that's just sort of peeking out between the two blossoms. So I'm adding a little bit more yellow to my green, and then I'm just going to go ahead and do all of the leaves the same way. I'm just going to put that pale green down first and add my darker colors where the shadows would be, and sort of coax them out toward the tips of the leaves in just certain areas, just to give it an indication of some texture and a little bit of direction. So I'm just going to finish up the leaves with just a few little shadow, places that I want it to be a little bit darker. And now I'm just going to add a little bit of Naples yellow, whatever warm yellow you have, Indian yellow, right to the center of each little blossom where you can actually see the center, which is just the two in the front. And just add that little bit of yellow, and then we are going to come back with some of a sort of a darker purple. I think it's a magenta. We're going to come back with some permanent magenta, and we're going to start making shadows along the edges of the petals, so that they even separate a little bit more from each other and they have a little bit more dimension. So I am going right in there, right beside where one petal is overlapping the other, right onto dry paper, but then I'm taking sort of a damp brush and just sort of blending out that one edge over the petal so that there's not a hard edge on that side. I just want the hard edge to be right tucked right under where that top petal is overlapping the bottom petal. And this gives it a little bit more dimension and starts to really shape the flowers a little bit more 3D. I have a bunch of geraniums on my front porch right now and they are looking really good. So that's what inspired me. I grow a lot of flowers. I have them in pots, I have them in flower beds, I have them in the ground. I've got seeds that I've saved. I don't know, it's just sort of an obsession, just like art. Those are the two things that I think I am going to try to do until I die, and that's garden and paint. So we're just getting these shadows going, just where they overlap, and that is giving it that depth and dimension and making it look more 3D. And once you get some shadows in, if you want a little few darker shadows on the leaves, I'm going ahead and I'm painting in another leaf right there because I just feel like it needed a little darker leaf. But now we are going to take my bleed proof white and I'm going to start adding some highlights and details, and that really punches the flower up. That really gives it a nice little punch up there. I like this bleed proof white. It is Dr. Let's see, let me read it. It is Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white, and you could use white acrylic to do this, or gouache, white gouache, or a white paint pen, whatever you have. I just like the bleed proof white, and I'll link that below in case you're interested in it. But I'm just going to put some highlights on sort of the red edges of the petals, and that'll give it a little bit more separation, but it also adds to the 3D quality. Even though we're not going for super realistic, it just adds a little extra dimension to it, and I really like it. I'm glad that I decided to add it. And here around the edges, like right in the center of the petal, I'm doing a few little dots of the white to make sort of a pattern that's coming off of the throat of the flower, right around that center part. You see those little white dots. And I'm just creating a little pattern there because on the geraniums that I'm growing on my porch, they have sort of like these little white patches right there around the edge of the center. So I'm just trying to duplicate that a little bit. And you can also come around once you get this done and add some of these white highlights to your leaves. You can even make it look like some of the veins have a little highlights on them, you know, or create veins with some of the white highlight. It's up to you. Just use your imagination. We're not, again, trying to go for super realistic. We're just going for pretty. So sometimes pretty doesn't have to be realistic, and sometimes realistic can be really ugly. So we're going for pretty and not necessarily realistic. And I'm just adding a few more of those little white lines, those little patterns. And notice I'm not outlining the whole petal. I'm just strategically placing these little white highlights. You don't want to outline the petal. That would look, even though we're not going for realistic, that would look off. It would make the petal look a little off. So we don't want to do that. We just want to add it into some strategic areas and on your leaves as well. So we will just finish up the details. I'm adding a few little veins, little highlights on the leaves, and just coming back in, adding a few little highlights into the flower. And I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and give me a thumbs up if you liked this video, and share it with a friend that likes art as much as we do. Thanks again for watching.